Okay,
No, it's my dad's.
have this meeting come to order. It's established that we are all here. If anyone has a cell phone that's on, please turn it off.
Please.
Is there anyone in the audience that has a public comment that is not an agenda item tonight? Now's your chance. Okay. Public comments are closed. Item consent calendar. Let's have everyone review the minutes from.
January 23rd.
All right, do I hear a?
My only question was the consent calendar said that the Planning and Transportation Commission minutes, but there are two sets of minutes, and I know it's listed below as study session and special meeting. So do we make one motion for the both minutes, or do we just approve the consent calendar?
If you're good with both minutes, you can just, one motion's fine.
So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes as they were written.
Second.
Okay, in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign, okay. Okay,
Rock and roll.
let's rock and roll here. Let's talk about 4940 El Camino Real.
Do we want to rotate?
We flipping a coin?
Applicant's not here.
Mr. Chair, if we could, the applicant for item number 2 is en route. So if we could, we'd like to reorder the
Certainly. Oh, sure.
agenda, take item 3 and
Okay, item 3,
All right, go for it.
go for it.
Good evening, Chair, members of the Commission. This item before you is a landscape plan modification for the new hotel that's currently under construction at 1 Main Street. Attached with your staff report, I did include the original landscape plan that was approved, and then also with the plans, you can see there is the proposed landscape plan. The changes overall are relatively modest. Primarily, if you look at it, the plaza in front of the hotel at the corner of Main and San Antonio will be getting larger in terms of its hardscape area, and the landscape will be simplified, and that will be in keeping with the overall French style of the building. Also, along the back of the hotel, adjacent to kind of that narrow portion of Plaza 3, there will be some clay pots with some orange citrus trees added as well. Overall, staff is in support of the changes, and with that, I am available if you have any questions.
I have a question.
All right, shoot.
So Zach, my question is that on the crosswalk that's on that corner at San Antonio that connects to the island, and the height of the new structures and stuff, is that going to be too high so that a driver could see through it? I don't know the height, but if you're in a car, can you see to that crosswalk so you're not going to come around that corner and blindside somebody?
The height of the boxed hedge would be between 2 and 3 feet in height, and that would be consistent with our visibility triangle requirements.
And so the city would maintain and make sure that that's cut to that level?
Well, in this particular case, all landscaping and surfaces back of curb will be maintained by the hotel as part of a special maintenance agreement with the city.
Okay.
Zach, I have a question. Do we have any kind of drawing or plans for what the plaza itself will look like, or do we just have the landscape?
Are you thinking of like a three-dimensional? Because, I mean, the plaza's included, or were you?
What I mean is what kind of stone, what kind of paving is going to be used?
L2, lower left-hand corner.
We do have those details, and Zach can get those, but I think the rendering that was presented to the commission when the project was first reviewed was much more graphic and rendered, whereas this is getting more to the construction stage, so it's a little bit simpler of a diagram.
Okay.
Yeah, so that stone material, we don't have a color photo of it. It is included in black and white on the sheet L2, and I'm sure the applicant, Abby, can elaborate on that further.
So are we looking at a pair of walkways with paving stones or grass, or what? I'm just trying to get a flavor for what the composition of the surface is on the plaza.
Yeah. So if you look at the last sheet in the attached with the staff report, that kind of does a zoom in of the plaza. The materials will all be uniform. There isn't going to be designated pathways through it, so it'll all be one stone for the entire plaza area.
Okay, hang on just a second.
ask a second question while you're,
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's that?
I have another question.
I shoot.
The bike sign that's within the plaza, which would be on the owner's property, doesn't have to meet the sign ordinance, right? Because it's on the owner's property.
Yeah, I mean, it's still subject to our sign regulations, but it'll be for those on private property, and that was specific in discussing with the applicant, that if there was any signage included, it needed to be on their property, and couldn't be within the public right-of-way.
And my concern is that there's a allowance for a table that's supposed to be right next to the bike rack. So is it really a bike rack, or is it really just a sign?
The tables are movable, so they're kind of placed there right now, but really, those tables and chairs would be moved around the plaza as assorted, but the goal would be that all the bike racks are usable if they're there to meet the bike parking.
Okay.
Questions? Further questions? Comments?
I am prepared to make a motion unless I see
Okay.
commentary from other commissioners. If not, let me find the right piece of paper so I quote the right thing. I move that we approve landscape plan modification for the new hotel at 1 Main Street, subject to the findings and conditions of our staff report for subject property 10D04.
Second that.
In favor?
Aye.
We pass. Thank you. Happy you do.
Have
you
fun
do
with
too
your
good a
project.
job.
Yeah.
You didn't,
Yeah, it's going to be really nice when it's done.
And
Should
it's
we,
moving along
Should we
so
go to
nice.
item 4, David? David? Should we go to item 4?
Okay.
Keep rolling.
4 or 5? I mean, it doesn't matter to us.
Do you want to do 5 before we get into 4?
Sure.
Pardon me?
You don't care, one way or the other?
No, we should maintain the order.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's do 4. Let's go to 4. Yep.
Who is the planner to discuss this?
Who is the planner to discuss the downtown
Your
parking
turn.
management plan?
Thank you, I'll be presenting this. So this was requested to be on the agenda for discussion purposes, and it's regarding the downtown parking management plan. Downtown parking has been studied extensively in local South Coast by downtown business groups as well as city council point of view. But I think what we're seeing now is, and the parking management plan verifies this, is that years ago, as we were studying downtown parking, our parking capacity was right where it should be, 80 to 85% capacity. There wasn't really a parking shortfall at that time. But what we're seeing today, as a result of a couple of different factors, one is that downtown is actually more active and more successful today than it was 10 years ago. So we're seeing more impact on our parking plazas. We've also lost some parking spaces as a result of the redevelopment of 400 Main Street and is some of the streetscape work that's gone on over the past couple of years. And then thirdly, we're anticipating that the activity level downtown is just going to build on itself as other projects come online, particularly the new Safeway and the 400 Main project. So we wanted to evaluate those efforts, confirm data that we had in the past, and develop a plan to go forward. And there's really two documents that are most relevant to where we are today. One is the Downtown Opportunity Study, which the Commission reviewed several years ago. The draft was approved in 2009, and EIR was done, and was formally approved in 2010. And this earlier study was looking at the city building a parking garage, and it evolved from there as a result of the committee's efforts, really, and input and recommendations to council as a public-private project. The parking garage at the time was not affordable, and we were looking at ways to finance it in a public-private where somebody would perhaps build out plazas 1, 2, and 3, which are in front of the train depot, in front of Walgreens, and in front of the Grill, and then in exchange for a long-term ground lease, they would build the parking. So that would achieve 200-300 additional public parking spaces, as well as park those offices. But by the time the project was approved, there was a great deal of construction going on downtown, construction disruption, both public and private, and I think it was wisely agreed to table the project at that time. It's still valuable data that can be used in the future, but I don't think there was a desire then to take on, three-story buildings and plazas 1, 2, and 3, and all with everything else that's happening, still today. So that document was tabled, and then we moved forward with the management plan itself, which is up on the dais. And it's a lengthy document, so we didn't print out multiple copies of it. But essentially what it was doing was looking at, well, how do we manage the parking that we have today best? If we're not going to move forward with something as ambitious as the opportunity to. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
So the goal of the management plan was really to look at how can we manage the parking supply that we have today, make sure that it's maintained at adequate levels, and again, 85% capacity is where you want to be. You don't want to have too much parking where they're not being used. That's not efficient, but you also don't want them to get to 90% or more capacity, because then they start to turn drivers away who can't find a place to park. So that was a primary goal. And then we also did want to look again at what a potential reserve supply would be, because, again, from the time the opportunity study was approved to the management plan being undertaken, we were seeing more activity downtown and more pressure on our parking plazas. So those were the two groups. We undertook that plan in 2012. It was approved last year in the spring. It was presented in a draft format to several public groups, including the Chamber, the Village Association, a special meeting that was held just for property owners downtown, a meeting that was held just for business owners downtown, and then a meeting that was noticed in a wide radius to people that live around the perimeter of downtown to get their input. So the conclusions of the plan, which were accepted by City Council, the plan's been approved, were to increase the number of long-term parking stalls downtown, and that's been done. In the perimeter north and south plazas, the long-term permit spaces now come all the way up to the first rows that abut the buildings themselves. That's been accomplished. Increased downtown parking enforcement to a full-time level, Monday through Saturday, and that's being investigated as part of the budget process. And acquire more modern technology, license plate readers and carts and things that other agencies are using to be able to more effectively and more efficiently manage the parking. And that's being considered as part of the budget process also. And then another idea, which is simple but I think effective, is considering graduated parking fines. So right now, if you're an employee parking in a short-term parking stall and you get a ticket, it's about a $54 fine, and you can get next month another $54 fine, and you may just think that's okay. So a graduated fine would be the first one is a single fine, the second one is double, and the third one is a triple. And then to enforce that message that
Is there a 3 strikes and you're out?
I'm not sure how far I would go
Life in
beyond that.
prison.
So. And we're going to be looking at that as part of the fee schedule, I believe. So that's really the enforcement part of it. In terms of the parking supply, as I mentioned, the demand is increasing. We expect it to continue to demand, especially as some of these new projects come online. And then acknowledging the loss of parking that we've seen over the last couple of years. And we had the CDM Smith, a transportation firm that prepared the plan, look at what our near and long-term needs would be. And we did come up with an acknowledgement that we're going to need 50 to 100 plus additional parking spaces just to take care of today's needs and future needs. And then on top of that, we do want to have, and this has always been an objective of the plan, we do want to have a supply of parking that can be sort of surplus that we can sell for development rights or as in lieu parking spaces. And the concern has always been, since the businesses on State and Main have such narrow 25-foot frontages, it's not physically possible for them ever to provide any additional parking on their properties, so that's really preventing any new development on State and Main particularly. It's not so true outside of State and Main where the parcels get bigger, but it is true in the downtown core. So we did want to get a surplus of 100 or minimum spaces. And so we looked at 2 ways to accomplish that. Last year, an idea was discussed about restriping the existing parking plazas to go from the sort of wide diagonal spaces to more efficient perpendicular spaces with maybe a smaller dimension. There are some drawbacks to that. You're going to lose most of the trees in the plazas, and you're not going to have that convenient diagonal in and out parking, but that is the model that most shopping centers would use, for example, to get.
How many would we gain if we did that?
Using the city standard, which was part of the discussion, we want to maintain our city standard, which has been studied recently and is an appropriate, it's not too big, but it's not too small, 9 by 18. It would yield about 75 parking spaces. And so when you take the cost of that yield, which I think was about $8 million, because the parking plazas can't just be repainted. They have to be
Completely
rebuilt, utilities have to be put underground, trees have to be put in.
Oh, yeah.
It was about an $8 million project, so that put the parking stalls at a relatively low yield at about $110,000 each. They then compared that to a traditional parking garage where you can yield about 300 parking spaces and build a garage in a single rectangular parcel and not have all 10 plazas disrupted. And that was about a $10 million project, but because it yielded 300 parking spaces, which was much more cost-effective. So that was the recommendation of the report, and City Council has accepted that recommendation, and City Council has also made it a priority this year, and they're going to be taking this on probably in March or April to look at means to develop a program to finance and build a parking garage.
You ready for questions?
I've got several, but I'll.
Let's start
I'll
at
wait
the
till
end and
end.
work our way through it.
No, let's start at the, let's start
Started
at,
that in? Okay.
okay,
I'm going to wait.
okay. Are you loading your guns, or?
No,
So-
I have several questions, but I want to know what everybody's thinking about.
Okay.
I know they already have a few things on their mind, and some of them,
So do I.
some of the planners have been on these studies before, so I'm just curious to see what they're.
Ronit?
Okay, so the question I had about restriping was, it looked like smaller plazas, you could accomplish the restriping for less. I mean, if you look at doing it all at once, it's a gargantuan process. But for the time being, and we've had developers come to us who are short on parking, what is your thought if someone came to the city and said, I would do Plaza 4 or 5 at a cost of $450,000, which would be about $56,000. If we're assuming that each plaza will net an additional 8 spots, which is I think how they worded it. The first person gets the price for $56,000 and they do it and they cover the costs, and it's kind of like an in lieu where the city is benefiting because they're not interested in doing this gargantuan project and they're creating more spots. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. Would we entertain that kind of a?
And we are looking at that in parallel with this. We are developing a policy discussion for council, how we would manage if a single property owner or a group of property owners in a particular parking lot or plaza wanted to do that. How would you equitably then redistribute those parking spaces that were gained? And then in front of that, there's still the issue, is that acceptable to the community to go to smaller, perpendicular parking spots with the loss of the trees that entails. So if that part of it is acceptable, then the second part is, well, then how do you redistribute those parking spaces once they're created?
Okay. The next piece was the parking in lieu. I was looking at how Los Gatos since '91 has a fee, and since 2000 has increased, and Palo Alto does too. And it's just surprising that we just don't even. It's not even on the table that it hasn't already been implemented. And I'm concerned if we wait till there's an actual garage plan and then figure it out, we're going to be behind.
And that has been studied and discussed at great length over the years. And the thing with parking in lieu programs is you have the parking garage either under design or constructed. And in the past, most parking garages were built with redevelopment tax increment fees. So you take a district like the downtown, you establish a redevelopment district, and that tax increment revenue gets set aside. You build the garage, and then once you have it or have it planned at least, then you can sell the spaces, and typically they're sold at not full market rate, because if you just said, we're going to charge, $50,000 a parking space, most property owners are not going to want to buy off-site parking, is what we found, for full market rate. So you typically want to have like an assessment district or a redevelopment district, and then be able to sell those spaces at a lesser rate, and then they become very desirable. So we don't necessarily have to have the garage built, but we have to have a program in place. So, for example, if the city fully funds the parking garage for $10 million, there might not be an expectation that those spaces would be sold at a subsidized rate. But if there's participation from property owners at whatever level that is, then I think there's an easier argument to sell those spaces at a lesser rate. And again, then they become much more desirable. So if we establish next week in lieu program and said you can buy parking rights into the future for $50,000 each, 10 years from now we would maybe have,
5.
yeah, $50,000. So.
Well, the thing is, because our projects are required to fully park themselves, what we're talking about is someone in the smaller parcels area that James was talking about, the core of the historic downtown.
Mm-hmm.
Someone being able to look ahead and say, I could anticipate that I could get an economic gain of 400% if I tore down my building and could park elsewhere. And it takes an incredibly strong economy to do that. And because the larger parcels are self-parking, we don't have a market, is, I think, sort of clear. The in lieu program works if you have economic motivation. And I don't think that is apparent. I mean, I don't think we have the ability to do that until we actually have a garage. And even then, it would take it would take some rezoning in the downtown core, I think, to make a cost-benefit ratio work, in my opinion. Los Gatos, in some ways, is so similar to our town, and in this way, they're not, because they had different options.
Yeah.
Any more questions, Wendy?
No. I'll hold.
So I actually was curious, there was a phrase you used, James, that the potential reserve spaces. What you're talking about is the potential reserve spaces, for example, for restriping, if we chose that. And so my comment on this discussion, which is, I think, was quite lucid, having sat on several of the downtown development parking situation analyses, I can say that the opportunity study, and now what was confirmed in the latest study, is yes, we do need a garage. Okay. The opportunity study was one way of looking how we could effectuate that without the city bearing the entire cost. That makes a lot of sense. If we could do it without bringing in a public-private process, that would work too. It's just whatever we can make happen. But I think I can speak for the entire commission that we all know we need a garage. There's never been a debate in this dais about that issue. The problem that I have about the parking management is that I kept looking at that and thinking, it's just punitive. I understand that we're looking at this and saying we have the spaces, they're not being used at their most efficient level. But I think at a certain point, we have two lines that are meeting, and the meeting point is management is not going to do it. We need more spaces sooner. And so my comment on the third item is, I think restriping in some ways is like moving deck chairs around on the Titanic. The fact is, it would be incredibly disruptive, even if we did one parking plaza at a time, because with the temporary parking spaces that we all used for a number of years that got taken back at the 400 Main Street project, the First Street project, we know that you can force the employees to park, you can raise the fines, you can be more effective in your management, but the bottom line is we need more spaces. And I don't think that restriping, in my opinion, is worth the money to do it because the yield is so low, relatively speaking. Now, in truth, I appreciate that 100 spaces is probably the minimum we need, but that's based on today. And I think James was very careful to point out that we are enjoying, and I hope we continue to enjoy, a much better, vibrant downtown with more people coming. And if we want to encourage that, 100 spaces is going to cover today, but I think the original parking plazas, which we all enjoy, someone was very forward-thinking and put in a lot more parking than they ever thought they would need. And it lasted 60 years without a problem, 50 or 60 years. So now I think if we're going to go to the level of expenditure that we're talking about in any of these solutions, I think we need to be as, in our recommendation, as forward-thinking in a larger scale and say 80 to 100 spaces in 5 years. I hope that will not be enough, in which case we should be looking more assertively, and that's why, in my opinion, the garage has to take a much higher priority than having a punitive parking management plan.
So, like Phoebe, I'm going to offer some commentary and not ask questions. And I, too, was part of several of the parking management studies. What's coming out of these recommendations really is, at best, a Band-Aid. And I think Phoebe's characterized it in her own way. I think it doesn't address the problem. And I have gone on record in the past saying that I think we need a parking garage. I'll say it again. We need a parking garage. I think the notion of our opportunity study and redeveloping plazas 1, 2, and 3, in my opinion, cannot proceed until we address traffic and circulation issues in this town. Because whether it's good for the town economically, bad, neutral, it will create huge traffic and circulation issues that we've already got the problem. We don't know it yet because 1 Main Street isn't operational yet. 467 First Street isn't operational yet. 400 Main Street isn't operational yet. Safeway isn't operational yet. I have nightmares about going to Safeway except at 11 o'clock at night. Guys, I'm serious, because I think it's going to be, how are you going to get there? How are you going to park? How are you going to get out? And how are you going to address traffic? So I do believe we need something. I agree with Phoebe that a restriping effort will get you some spaces, but it's not worth the disruption. It really isn't. For the amount of spaces, if you go over 10 parking plazas, on average, and I know they're different size, you're getting 7.5 spots per plaza, and you are disrupting that plaza for 6 months at least. And you have to look at that and say, why would you do that? Why would you do that if there's an opportunity to build a parking garage? Well, we have money. The city has money in the bank. It's collected money from Packard Foundation. It's collected money from a number of projects. And it's sort of like the homeowner. You've got a $10 million project, and maybe you can't build it all at once, but you figure out how to build what you can afford. And so I'm disappointed in the plan recommendations, and I think the priority in terms of solving the problem for our downtown is completely backwards.
I was disappointed that Phoebe took the words right out of my mouth. The whole idea of rearranging the parking plazas and repainting them for $8 million and disrupting is just silly. It is rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. I think everyone pretty much understands at this point, we don't need another parking study. We probably don't even need a discussion. Everyone realizes.
We just had a parking study.
Yeah,
So we don't need any more.
we don't, what we need is a parking garage. We need a bunch of new parking spaces, not only to fulfill today's needs, but obviously for the future. What concerns me is not that we are going to restripe parking lots or that it's going to be disrupted, but I don't hear anyone talking viably about how we're going to pay for a $10 million capital improvement like this. And I think that's the thing that's stopping us. If we had a viable way of, if somehow magically $10 million dropped in our lap, I think we should, in 6 weeks, we should get the machinery out here and start digging holes. I mean, it's clear we need to do this. It's just a matter of figuring out what it is, how it is we're going to pay for it and get it done. Because like John says, the growth for the city is going to be stunted until we get this figured out. And we're just going to choke on our own automobile traffic.
Why don't you think a parking in lieu program would make a dent in it?
I'm sorry?
Why don't you think a parking in lieu contribution would make a dent in that?
Probably because I don't understand how it would work, but if we could generate the amount of money we needed, that'd be great. I mean, I'm speaking against it. I just haven't heard anyone put forth a plan where we can afford a $10 million capital improvement. And maybe parking in lieu is the right answer. I don't know. It might be the right answer. I didn't mean to be negative about it. I'm ignorant about it. But I think it's come to the point now that we need to, probably not us, but the council needs to act very strongly about this subject, because it's, by the time all the ducks get lined up in order to do a project like this, it gets designed, we figure out how to finance it, the location gets picked, and we've let the contract, and the contractor's ready, and they buy all the steel and the concrete. It takes a long time to build one of these things. I've watched them build 2 at Stanford University, and they are really complicated, long, involved projects.
And we've got somewhere between $3.5 and $5 million in the bank specifically allocated for parking.
I don't know that.
So
that's good news.
We've got a big chunk. I mean, it's not all of it, but we certainly have a chunk of change.
Hey,
There's a lot of head shaking going on.
I'd like to, Michael?
Sure. I have some technical questions because I read through the document and I was using it as a chance to learn about parking and how we as a planning commission, or as myself as a planning commissioner, should look at various projects as they came through. And so I have some specific questions, and hopefully everyone will bear with me. The first part is that there's a floor area ratio that says, okay, if the downtown area for the building, if somebody builds another floor, that has to go, it has to be parked somewhere else. But on page, so that's on page 3, but then on page 6, it says that they ultimately decided to adopt changes to their zoning code, which eliminated the floor area ratios and allowed for 2-story buildings in the downtown core and 3-story buildings in the outer cores. So I was confused, like, is the FAR in place, or is it not in place?
When we updated our downtown zoning codes, we eliminated floor area ratio caps.
Okay.
They weren't really relevant, and we went to form-based zoning with height caps. And if you can get a 2-story building or a 3-story building within that height cap, as long as it meets the height cap and meets our design criteria, that's acceptable. But that didn't change the parking regulations. The parking regulations, you're allowed to build up to 100% FAR. So if somebody has a little 2,700 square foot building in the downtown district, and they have a 7,000 square foot lot, they could build a new 7,000 square foot building and not have to provide any parking. But once you exceed that 100% FAR, it's supposed to be parked at the regular zoning standards.
So for the second level, or do they get the first level free?
Or you could have a smaller footprint on the first floor that's only half of the lot size, and you could put a second floor on it, and then you've achieved your 100% FAR.
Okay. So the second question I had was about the zoning codes. This is on page 4. It says parking stall dimensions, and the last sentence says, the city has since done away with the compact standard, but plazas have not been restriped to meet the current standard. So I was curious, what's the standard?
Well, up until about 5 or 8 years ago, the city had very traditional parking, sort of suburban-based parking standards. You had the one big stall, 10 by 20 approximately, and then you could do up to 25% of these compact stalls, which were all very substandard, and big cars would still park. So we reevaluated our parking standard and went to what was referred to as a unistall. It's an average 9 by 18. It's relatively comfortable for all car sizes, and we eliminated our regular versus compact requirements.
Okay. And then on page 7, it talks about that Safeway is going to get put in, when they put in their 154 spaces, 129 of them are going to be for the public, and those are going to be 90-minute spaces. And my question is, so who's maintaining their 90 minutes? Is that part of the city's requirement, or is that going to be up to Safeway to judge if somebody's there for 90 minutes? So you could potentially park there, and if Safeway doesn't care, it's actually not 90 minutes.
That's exactly right. Yeah, but it's private land, but the 129 spaces are fully dedicated to this public, but Safeway has to maintain the parking garage, maintain its security, and maintain any parking enforcement they choose to.
Right. And along those lines, if we looked at a private project that was going on and be built, like the one at San Antonio and First, they're surrounding parking that's on street. We don't count that parking on street, but in the plazas and in the downtown, the State and Main Street, we seem to be adding the parking that's available on street, which doesn't seem to be consistent with what I would think, right? You would look at all the downtown public places and look at the retail places and not count what we have available on the street, because on the street parking, we don't do that for any private building.
Yeah. No, I can't think of a project in the parking district where we somehow gave credit for on-street parking to a building addition.
But in this report, they mentioned there's 1,449
Sure.
spaces, but there are really 1,204 that are in the plazas and 245 that are on the street.
Yeah, that's correct. And those are that's the supply of downtown district parking. But if somebody was going to build a new building over 100% FAR, they would still have to provide new parking in some manner. That's the parking that exists today. It's just distinguishing what's on street versus what's in the plazas.
That's a
And-
basic nose count, that one.
Yeah, was kind of, because they do all these ratios and they say, well, okay, there's 1,205 and we've got demand at this level. I'm like, well, really, we're using the on-street parking that really isn't.
But the district is so different because that is all public parking.
Right.
I mean, it goes down to, we know we have 120 spaces in Plaza 7, for example. We know we have 87 in Plaza 10. I mean, we have it that fine. It's a nose count. Yeah, it's just a count of what exists in the district.
Yeah. And then this is kind of a follow-up with this question, because it got me thinking about, like, and I'm going to pick on a few businesses that are on First Street. Bumble. Bumble used to be a garden shop, and it was parked right for that garden shop. It's now become a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for myself, I go to Bumble, I park in the public plaza and walk over that. But yet they're not part of the parking district. So shouldn't that have been rezoned or re-looked at as far as parking requirements? Because the city's, restaurant code for parking, I don't think it's met.
I would have to research the specifics, but I know that Bumble, Forest on First,
Another one?
and Studio 151, they all met their technical parking, not using district parking, using private parking.
But how-
That would have been discussed in each of those staff reports, so.
Yeah, I don't, because
I don't see how Bumble could have.
I don't see how Bumble could have, and I don't
Yeah.
remember.
And Forest on First either.
Exactly.
Well, Forest on First was more recent, so I do recall
Forest on
they were
First used
able.
to be Styler's.
Yeah,
And
right.
I remember, I worked on that. We
Yeah.
had to do a special thing in order to get the
Right.
parking for Stylers in front.
Right, and
Well,
so I know.
actually-
And that's
front
never
and
come to
back.
planning when it was converted,
Right.
right? So therein lies one of the issues of who's doing the approval and what's the criteria.
Well, I can, research that data and get it to you, but I know that they were all evaluated for parking.
I guess that's my question. If somebody decides to convert a building, from one type to another type,
Right.
it doesn't go in front of us, it's staff's decision, it doesn't go in front of city council.
Well, it's a technical requirement. If it converts from a retail
Look
to,
at the use.
if it converts from a retail to a restaurant, it has to meet the conversion requirement. And I was going to say, Forest on First was more recent, so I do know they restriped the back, gained one or two spaces, and they were able to lease some surplus spaces in the office building across the street, and that technically met their parking requirements. So they did have to find additional parking.
But doesn't go in front of city council, it's a staff.
Goes to the department.
That was a remodel, so the Stylers came through the whole, A&S at the time, Planning Commission, City Council.
Okay.
But no, remodeling the building and changing a business use does not come before the Planning Commission.
Okay.
So
Is that it, Michael?
No, I got about three more. Go ahead.
I was just going to comment on what James said. So are you saying that Forest on First has leased parking across the street? Did I understand you to say that?
Yes, and it's a,
And wherein is that made
Look.
notice to the public so that they know that that's available to them?
well, I think the agreement requires that their employees park there, so that's how it's used. There is a parking agreement with that project to make sure that those leased spaces were not,
Okay.
and yes, and they can't, it can't just be dissolved without the city's approval, and I would fully expect that it includes a requirement that our employees park there, because, yeah, you wouldn't expect the public to know to go under an office and park there.
Right. That was my point.
And my question is kind of in that same line. So we have the white dot program, right, where we have so many dots that are in these parking plazas, and people can buy a permit to gain access or to park in those without having to deal with the time limits?
If they're within the district. You can only buy a long-term parking permit if you work and prove that you're within the parking district.
So that was my question. So those are only given to people that are working and they have to give the place a business? Because my thought was, well, here you've got Schwab, you've got a bunch of buildings around the perimeter that people park in the plaza and then go to those businesses when they're supposed to be fully parked underneath, which means that they're not fully parked underneath. There's available parking because they should have been able to meet that demand. And yet they're parking in the public plaza, which seems like maybe we can work on, my thought was maybe there's an opportunity to try to move some of the employee parking into those other centers. I don't want to pick on Jerry, but, maybe Jerry's got, 20 spaces. He knows he's always vacant. And could those be used for the city to park employee parking for downtown in his spot and work on some program to do that?
Theoretically, that could be done, if the property owner was willing to do it.
I'm not going to do it.
We evaluate our private property parking regulations pretty regularly. When we re-evaluated our office parking, for example, the complaints we were getting from property owners, and because of the nature of the offices that we have in Los Altos versus other offices you might have at a much higher density, is that we're overparking them on private property. I'm not talking about the parking district. That the Northern Trust building, you go behind there and the parking lot's always, so that's kind of the comments that we're hearing. But we do regularly evaluate those, and we compare them to industry standards, national standards, best practices for the Bay Area. We haven't done it in about 5 years, but we did readjust them that recently.
Because one of my thoughts was, we've got all those condominiums down 1st, 2nd, 3rd Street, right, that during the day are probably empty. And again, an opportunity to take employee parking, and I would send a note to staff, but there's essentially about 700, 600, probably 600 employee parking spots that have been allocated in the parking plazas, the dots, which represent about 45% of the parking. And if we could look at ways to get employees away from those spots and entice them to park in other places, we could actually gain spaces without having to build anything in a short term.
Theoretically, that could be done. I mean, number one, you'd have to have a willing property owner. And number two, you're going to run into the same issues that we were talking about with Forest on First and Bumble. That project still has to meet city requirements. So if you have an employee parking in there for 8 hours a day, is that fulfilling the parking requirements of that particular condo or that particular office? That's a whole other issue.
Right, yeah. I'm just trying to think and look at, and that's what I'm trying to share.
What are your other questions?
The other question I had was, the one thing that I noticed in the study, and David and James have heard me talk about this, is that, on page 75 is this wonderful land use, which says, okay, we have 158,000 boutique retail, we have 35,000 personal services, 27,000 banks, 140,000 office. We have so many spots that are in the plaza based on some formula back in 1950-something, 2.7, as has been told. But, in the zoning code, we allow a certain amount of parking for those types of businesses. So in retail, it's 5, I think, spots, and offices, it's 3 per 1,000. And it would seem to me that we should look at probably a formula for shared use of the parking plazas to say, okay, some formula, because who knows if a 200 garage is going to be enough based on what the amount of retail it is. I mean, I've heard you say, James, well, this is the way it's been, but I'm trying to look forward to saying, well, there should be a formula we kind of put in play to say this is how many we need based on...
Today, this is what would be required.
Yeah, based on that formula of how much retail. And so when a project comes before us, and this is where I was thinking, if a project comes before us and it's going to build up 2 stories, it's going to need so much more parking, we can kind of already say, well, we've got this much extra, or we don't have extra, we need to build more.
Oh, I entirely agree. We did that 5 years ago when we were looking at a parking garage, and when we take on the parking garage study this year, we'll be doing it again. No, we absolutely have to have a current shared use parking. So there's 2 things. When I say that's the way it's been, I just mean that's what was built.
Right.
That's what exists today. But as we go forward and downtown is more active and more successful, no, I don't think 2.7 is going to be the active.
Yeah.
But then you have to start thinking about things, well, is it, 3 per thousand for an office, 5 for,
Exactly.
10 for this other business?
So,
Or do you do typically in a shared parking ratio, first of all, you have economy, because people will go downtown, go to a hardware store, go to lunch, and go to, do multiple, so you don't
Absolutely.
need 3 spaces for every typical standalone use. But the other thing you have to be careful of, and we will be studying this, and it has to be reevaluated before we can build a garage or create an in-lieu program, is, how then do you establish that range? Do you, make the more intensive use 10 spaces per thousand, and then you never get that type of use?
Right.
Or do you, I would suspect we're going to go back to an averaging, and then that tends to penalize, the lower density uses. But those are all discussions that will be taking place. I mean, I would think we're going to end up somewhere at like 4 per thousand, just across the board. Because you don't want to discourage restaurants or discourage retail.
right, and that was what I thought. It was like, you have 220 State Street, which is all office buildings, and if whoever owns that land said, okay, well, I want to put retail in there, that changes the parking requirement, because instead of having, office workers that come and park all day, you now got a collection of people coming and going, and that's,
I
it's
think that's why that parking lot is largely empty, because I think it was parked to accommodate retail, but it hasn't been retail, so I think they have more parking than they need.
Yeah. And then the last thing was in regards to, I know Kathy's left, and Appendix A had all these recommendations by the city council as to what was going to happen and go forward, but is that still, it seems like things are kind of not in play. I mean, everything's waiting till June when the fiscal budget comes about. Is there anything that can be done to accelerate some of that stuff?
Well, again, there's 2 components to it. One is managing the parking, which comments were made already about how effective that is. Some have been done, like the long-term parking has been expanded. The other ones are budget concerns, hiring new people, hiring equipment. Those are, and I'm not in charge of parking management, or parking enforcement, but those are budget decisions, and council has directed us to make those budget decisions. But the other bigger piece that we're talking about tonight is the parking supply, and that's going to move forward.
Has the notion of pay for parking been completely nixed?
As in meters in the downtown?
Some form of metering, not specifically meters, but some form of metering.
Yeah, I would
It's the third
say,
rail of city council,
Pardon me?
the third rail for city council.
It's actually, it's in the study.
Touch it and die.
yeah, that was suggested and studied and taken off the table. for the
I think
time
it
being.
should have been, frankly.
Yeah.
So I have some comments.
Okay, I will, you'll be the last one, right?
Pardon me?
I will go first, and then you can be the
Oh,
last
oh, I
one.
forgot.
No problem.
Fast.
No, don't worry. You're going to
me
be
to
the
go or
last
you
one.
go?
I'll just go fast, and then it's all yours. I was hoping I'll hear some more comments what I was hoping to hear, but I didn't. And
We haven't heard it
maybe it's ignorance on my part, but to me it looks like study sessions. We can do it for the next 50 years, right? We can do study sessions. We can do more data collection. We can change the number of parkings, we can stripe them, we can remove this, we can remove that. We all know that, and it's in the report and it has been approved, that the parking structure seems to be the answer. What I don't understand is that if, coming from an architectural background, and I'm sure Phoebe can relate to this, if the project costs $10 million, I'm not saying that we have $5 million in the bank or $1 million in the bank. Why are we not being so aggressive in saying, yes, we need a parking structure. Yes, we know that it's going to be around $10 million. But what if we have $1 million, we have $2 million, whatever that number is? We're going to go ahead and move forward. We're going to finalize a location, put a deadline to it. We're going to get a plan on paper. And then figure out what the cost is. And then right now, since the past few years I've been here, I've been hearing about this, we've been reading this, we've been given this quite a few times. It's like you're waving, it's like when somebody goes to the contractor and say, tell us how much our house is going to cost. And they say, well, show us the plans. And they're like, well, we don't have the plan, we want a second story. They're like, give us something. So why are we not pushing for getting everything on paper, getting a property located, getting everything on paper, just like a school budget, that, hey, this is our deficit, we need to raise this much money, how do we do it? And being in Silicon Valley, I'm sorry, $10 million for a city is a hardship. when we need to bring business back into the city, to me, it just doesn't make sense. You have residents here who are paying $10 million to make their homes. I mean, if we need to vitalize Main Street and State Street to get businesses more excited in coming in, and we already know it's going to be an issue when all the businesses which are under construction are going to be up and running, maybe 300 parking stalls is not the right answer, but at least it's more than anything we can think of right now. But if we all keep thinking of studies, we can be doing it. I'm sure my daughter would be on planning commission by then.
I'm totally with you, and for me, the pieces that I'm just don't understand is why we don't put in an in lieu program now. If we think it's going to cost $10 million, and that's $33,000 a spot, and we know Mountain View is at $20,000, and Palo Alto is at $60,000, and say 40,
And I have nothing-
and start saving money, because when I did my remodel, if I only started saving money
Nobody would buy 'em.
for it when I got the estimate, I would have been in big trouble.
You would
So
still be out of the house.
Don't call it a formal in lieu program. Call it what the city of Campbell did, which was an interim in lieu program. And I have a feeling that people will just start lining up with
And I have no
projects.
problem with that program. What the problem I'm having is nobody is just pushing through. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to just come up with a place and say, okay, we're going to just put the plan together. We'll have a building here. This is how many parking. Then everything is black and white. 300 parking space. This is the structure. This is the cost as of today. And then the business community probably will step in. I mean, it's good for everybody. So I'm just curious, why can't we? I know there's so much red tape in every government, but I mean, this is Los Altos. We are Silicon Valley.
And I don't think it's-
We
and
are
I
a
don't-
very fiscally sound town. I have to say this. I never thought I would say this, but I have tremendous respect for our city council because we have this monolith. We have Palo Alto on one side of us. We have Mountain View on the other side. This Palo Alto's park and rec budget is larger than the entire town budget for Los Altos. We are a tiny town, and we are fiscally sound.
Is it fiscally sound, though, to paralyze development?
No, I'm not
Because
saying,
you don't
no,
have the
but I'm saying
funds.
at this moment, we have been fiscally sound. So our council has been very conservative. With that said, there are two pieces, and you have each said one, and I agree with them both. If we know that we need a garage, and that's a given, we don't need any more studies to say, do we need a garage? We know we need a garage. Then what we need to do is have someone in city council or city council as a group designate the place where the garage will be, designate how many spaces is the goal, and now we have an idea. And then whether it's an interim in lieu or whether it's taking seed money out of the fund that's not the 5 or 3 million, maybe it's 1 million, but that's our seed money that allows us to do the planning. Because I think James said this in a totally different discussion. If we wait, and this was a different project altogether, if we wait until it's time to do it, it's too late. We're already 5 years behind. If we do the planning in anticipation that we know it's going to happen, then when economic times pick up and businesses are willing to contribute and there's new development.
You're ready to go.
We're ready to go. And that seed money, that putting that money towards the idea is what pushes it forward. But I'm going to say this again. We have a very fiscally conservative city council, and I respect them tremendously. They have a really tough job. And it's one
okay.
thing to say, we got money, let's throw it around, but we really don't.
No, we're not throwing it around. Parking
Well-
is essential for
Okay,
our
this is,
growth.
Now you get to
my
do your
turn.
turn. Go for it.
All you-
Okay, normally, you guys, over the last year, when it comes to me, I'm the one that speaks the least. This is not going to be the time. Only because I am so aware of what parking does to a retail center that I am passionate about this. Also, because I've been approached and have discussed with virtually every group that is in the city about parking, because they know I'm chairman of the planning commission. So let me I'm going to give a couple of examples that will hopefully raise your eyebrows a little bit. We bought a large shopping center in Pittsburgh about 8 years ago. Home Depot, Burger King, Staples, large furniture, dynamite center. My investors loved it. 3 years later, I get a knock on the door from Caltrans and say, hey, we're going to be widening Highway 4, and we're going to be taking some of your parking lot. And we did a study, and land is worth $11 a square foot, and we're going to give you $110,000. I don't think so. That ain't going to work for me. After a 3-year lawsuit, we got $1.8 million, and that wasn't anywhere near enough to pay for what I lost, or what the investors lost, because Home Depot has and all retailers have a clause in there that says if we lose parking, we get to change the terms. Home Depot came to me and said, we'll stay, but we're going to reduce it. Burger King left, gone. They're gone. Burger King left. Staples reduced their rent. For 3 years, I had to struggle with a bank to renegotiate the loan just so I could save the property. Why? Because of parking. I'm telling you now that if you want to not attract retail in this city, just don't do anything with parking. All the parking studies that I've seen says that we need parking now, and I support it. I'm telling you, I own a building downtown, and almost daily, I have to kick people out of my parking spot. I said, well, who are you visiting here? Well, no, I'm going shopping, I'm doing this. You just stepped over my sign that says you can't park here. They don't care. Example number 2. We bought a shopping center in Lancaster, California, years ago, and we lost a tenant. And Ross was one of the tenants. So we lost a tenant, it was 30,000 square feet. That's a significant tenant. So we get a shop, we get a grocer that comes and says, we'll take the 30,000 square feet. I'm going, hey, yippee-ki-yay, right? Ross has a clause in their contract that says if their parking is compromised, we get to say no to it. Ross said no to it. We lost the shopping center. We lost it, gone. I couldn't support it. We have 30,000 square feet empty, no rent, no shopping center. So I'm telling you that I've read all the studies, and everybody's sitting back going, I'm saying Plaza 7 should dig deep and offer parking now. What does that do? A, it makes all your retailers that already exist real happy. B, it increases the value. Let me back up. One of the problems with downtown is that we have all these small little buildings. Well, how can you sell a small little building? Because you'd have to assemble a number of them in order to do something significant. However, if we had more parking, then the smaller buildings would rise in value, because then they could support an increased variable use. And if you can do that, then you're going to get these small business owners that are hanging on for their dear life, but they really can't do much with what they have, are going to say, well, okay, I'll sell, and someone will pick it up and say, okay, well, now you're doing this use, but I can make this use because we can have more people downtown. Look, we're going in the right direction with the city. That's why all of us are on the plan. That's why I'm on the Planning Commission. Believe me, if you wouldn't have made these zoning changes, I wouldn't be here. So if we already have the zoning changes, we have the momentum, we have the people doing the changes that we all want in Los Altos, provide parking. I'm telling you, it's key. It's the key. I've lost buildings because of it. I mean, I'm not done yet. Restriping. The problem with restriping is, you get more. You get more park, but B is you change. In order to restripe, you're going to change the ingress and egress of where the parking is now. And I'm telling you, you can't do that to a mature city like this. Because if people are used to coming in this way and going that way, you start to restripe this, and people are going to go, oh my God, what am I? And you're going to get accidents, you're going to get, so I think it would change, in my opinion, it would too much change the very dynamics of the parking to really make it as effective as we want to do. So restriping, yes, it's a solution, but it's way on the bottom of my list as opposed to getting a new parking structure. Also, if you have excess parking, you're going to get tenants that are going to be attracted to come here. I mean, tenants will come to this town now and say, well, there's no place for people to park, I don't want to be here. But if you have an expandable parking plan, then people say, okay, I can work with these dynamics, and I want to be here. But I'll bet you'll have more people that want to be here if you employ more parking, then we'll say that now. Let me see if I'm done yet, or am I? To me, if you want to do it, I'll just put, I'm a poker player, I'm all in. Plaza 7 is the most, to me, that's the one next to Safeway, right?
Yeah.
That's the most, that's got to be if it were me, it's the one you should look at. And that's what the studies say also. I'll shut up.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just, go ahead, but I would like to say something towards the end.
So if you have any concern about the small properties in town not being viable for acquisition, I would refer you to First Street, where Passerelle now owns a very significant chunk of the property from State Street to, is that Shasta? So it's already happening. So I mean, not to take away from your comments, I think we absolutely need parking, but I will tell you that the
demand is rising already.
The demand is absolutely rising already, which is a good thing.
If you had more parking, you think it would be a little better?
Sure.
I think so.
I bet if
disagreeing with the
by the
parking.
time we finish that first parking lot, we're already going to be talking about the second one, because so much will
Want to be here, so,
change, and there'll be so much momentum.
you know,
That's why I kind of want to get some answers of like, how much parking do we need? Because we all say we need more, but if we fully built out the city, what's that number? Right?
Well, the good thing there is if we have a successful model, 7 is an ideal location. All the rectangular parcels work really well. 2 and 8 are also nice because they're so central, and then you could just say, well, the 2 top decks are employee only, and you force all the employees out of the more convenient parking spaces. You could even say, there's no charge for it. You don't have to buy a permit, but you have to be up on that 3rd floor or you're going to get a ticket. And then all of a sudden,
What happens if you just said, the parking structure's for employee parking? I mean, if you
That's what I'm
took-
saying, yeah.
Yeah, the whole structure, not just the top deck,
Yeah,
but
it could be the entire
whole thing,
yeah.
and then you could have it secured so that the
Right,
entryway and exit are monitored. And
Right, it very well could be. You may want to preserve some along the buildings that have accesses off the back. But I just want to say that, I mean, I'm the biggest proponent of moving forward with the parking garage, and I have been for some time. And I'm the last person who wants to get in a cycle of doing more and more studies. I think we know where we are now. I think we know what our near and future needs are. And my comment about the rectangular parcels is it is expandable. If we build a parking garage on 7 or 8, for example, and we're happy with it, and the public likes residents like to use it, and it's attractive and it fits, we could replicate that in any of our other plazas. So we could continue to, we could put it in 8, we could put it in 2, we could put it in 3. And I agree, 300 is a very, very effective start. We know it takes care of today's needs, and we know it takes care of our future needs. And it provides us a pool of parking that we can then sell for assembling parcels or putting small additions on the existing parcels. And I'm really pleased that, really for the first time this year, the City Council has made it their priority to move forward with a garage and not, additional studies. So that is where we are. We're going to be taking an outline for how we can get there, and there's design and site planning, there's financing, there's, putting it out to bid and getting under construction. But if we can keep this momentum, and when I present these plans, I typically get the same reaction. I mean, you do get some, we need to study this further kind of a thing, but this is typically the reaction that I'm hearing. And so, as long as our city council is also hearing that reaction, I think this is something with this momentum we can get underway and have a plan within a year. We can have financing secured within a year, and we can get the project underway.
Is this something that we can do as a commission to help you?
Well, I think if the chairman wants to draft a letter reflecting the sentiments here to the mayor, that would be...
It's not on the agenda.
No, I think that would be independent, right? We could have that on the next agenda.
I'm sorry, I didn't get you.
Jolie says it's
Not
not
on
an
the
agenda.
agenda.
The agenda
It's-
was
it's
just
not
to
an
look at the
action
parking
item, so
study.
we're looking at the parking study.
What, I sent it to the mayor, or what I sent it
We're
to the city
studying
manager?
the parking study.
The mayor or the city manager?
We've already had stretched this agenda topic thin. So anyway, but I don't want to have a direction.
Is it to the mayor or the city manager?
You know, it's going to be the commission's determination, and Jolie can let me know if this is maybe, but I don't think there would be anything inappropriate about the chairman reflecting the comments
Summarizing the
Is
discussion.
that something I
to the-
should?
to the
get
mayor.
People,
Put it on the next agenda.
So what we need is to have it on the next.
I don't want to wait till the next agenda.
But you have to wait
I want
on,
to do it
It's not
now.
on the agenda. It's not
Oh.
on this agenda, so you.
this agenda was,
Discussion at the end.
But wait a
Yeah, the
minute, we have
agenda is
another item
actually-
on 5 on our agenda, which
Exactly.
is joint meeting with city council, where we are
Oh, yeah.
supposed to discuss the potential
course.
upcoming joint meeting with city council and items that might be on it. I have a feeling we might want to table this now and then get through our other agenda items. Jolie?
Well, you could, yeah, some of the other agenda item, but yeah, tonight you're just supposed to discuss this report and no action was supposed to be.
We did.
Fair to the
Good for us.
applicant to address that particular item now.
Well, let's see what happens when we get through our other agenda
Okay,
items.
yeah.
And are we going to?
Okay,
So
so
we done- so we're
downtown
done?
parking management
we're
plan?
done with the discussion.
Yes, good.
Okay, thank you. Now we can go to, is everyone here? Okay, so public hearing 2, 4940 El Camino.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. This project at 4940 El Camino Real was brought to you before the December 5th, 2013 meeting. It was continued for five concerns, including the material board, landscape planting plan, bike rack, sign concepts, and continuous sidewalk around the building. The applicant has updated the material board, and a updated material board was included in the packet, and the applicant is providing a material board tonight at this meeting. The landscape plan was also revised to include more specific landscaping plan at the front of the property. And there was also a concern about the blank wall on the building's south side. Condition number 11 has been added for the applicant to investigate an opportunity to add vegetation along the south wall. The wall does go to the property line, so the vegetative buffer would be on the adjacent properties, the adjacent property. So they would have to investigate that and then get back to us. The bike rack, there was a concern that the way style was not appropriate, and it was conditioned to be a standard horseshoe shape. The wave style is actually okay on private property, so that'll remain a part of the project. We would also like to clarify that there's additional sign area. The previous staff report left off that the office space also had sign area. So with that, there's 139 total square feet of sign area allowed on the property. There's an existing monument sign there, and there would be additional square footage that would be allowed on the building. So the original staff report stated that staff would recommend deferring the master sign program to a later date. We were still recommending deferring that to see what tenants would actually be in the property and what the sign regulation or sign needs would be at that time. So condition 10 has been added to the report that would defer that submittal to a later date and to be reviewed by staff. And the last concern was the sidewalks around the building. The applicant did not make changes to the discontinuous sidewalk. The entrances to the building have changed with the revised project, including the new entrance to the office building, and then maintaining the entrance to the boardwalk building, and then the new restaurant use at the front of the building. Condition number 12 has been added. there's a planting area in front of the boardwalk building. I'm sorry, in front of the boardwalk entrance. We're requiring that to be reduced in front to allow for a walkway to be constructed from the parking lot to the entrance. So it would maintain entrance to the boardwalk and the new cafe, and then the new entrance to the office would be constructed, and there wouldn't be a need for a sidewalk. With that, I can answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is also here to share the material board.
I have a quick question, and I just noticed that in that the buildings that are along El Camino, and this is one of them, are all the same distance away from El Camino. So this plan is now to move the structure closer to El Camino, and I'm imagining that the setbacks are for the zone are it's still within its limit. But I'm just curious why every building is set back, and this one now is going to be moved forward.
So they do have private CCNRs on these properties. So I did talk to the person that did develop the properties, and they have CCNRs that maintain that there's a setback in a landscape area in front of the building. Those are private requirements. They do meet city standards for setback. There's a 25-foot setback along El Camino from the front property line, which this project does maintain.
And then there's another piece of it. Years ago, when we first looked at rezoning El Camino and relaxing its zoning standards and addressing FARs and height limits and having a more urban development set of regulations, we reduced the setback from 50 feet to 25 feet. So yeah, the older buildings are all going to have that 50-foot.
So in essence, this is sort of the first case. We could see other buildings say the same thing. They'd like to incorporate and do that 25 feet.
Yeah, and that was intentional. The goal was they didn't necessarily have to be up to the sidewalk like you wanted in a downtown setting, because we did want some landscaping stuff, but we didn't want 50-foot and 80-foot deep parking lots off of El Camino. We wanted to get the buildings closer to the street. Yeah.
Did we come to some resolution about the monument sign?
We did not. The last meeting, they were going to revise the monument sign, but we didn't come to a conclusion on the signs. And staff is okay with the placement of the signs, except at the back of the building. Those are inappropriate because they do face residential properties. And so condition number 10 reflects that. And the sign areas are appropriate, but a master sign program would actually determine where the signs can be located and what the signs would be made out of.
So I thought part of the issue was that the boardwalk people wanted to retain the current, at least the size of the monument sign, because they felt that was a way of them attracting business driving by El Camino. But if there were other businesses, they would need to use some of the area of the monument sign. So the part of it that was devoted to the boardwalk would then become less, and so forth. But in reading this, what I understand is that the entire monument sign is not within city code, and if they modify it or tear it down, then they won't be allowed to rebuild it.
Exactly.
Correct. The existing
So
monument.
they have to, the only thing they can do is maybe reface it or paint it a different color or something, but.
Yes, they can change the materials on it to match the building. They can keep, it's non-conforming because of height. You can only have a 10-foot tall sign, and so they can keep the structure there and replace the materials on the outside and do new signs.
Okay.
You mentioned that staff had a concern about the vast blank wall. And I recall that was a concern of a couple commissioners as well. And there's been no change, and I'm curious why staff didn't sort of hold firm on requiring an improvement to that side of it.
So we did go out to the site again and evaluate the area. The area is on the adjacent property, since the building wall comes right up to the property line. There are 3 tree wells there. There's mechanical equipment and then signage for ADA parking. So it would have to be pretty minimal vegetation, and it would also have to they would have to get agreement from the adjacent property, and sometimes that's a private agreement, and then a private maintenance agreement that also has to be evaluated.
But
So were so it sounds like you were only looking at the landscaping options as opposed to also doing something
with the
to the
facade,
facade.
Something on the building
On the
itself, like decorative materials or public art
or colors, or different materials, or...
Okay. I pulled that it was a vegetation concern, so we investigated the vegetation, but we didn't look into different materials.
Do we want the applicant to say something, or should
Going
we
to
carry
examine
on with the
Well,
discussion?
I have one question of staff, which is on the, I don't know, but it has to do with the plan, so I don't know if that's the applicant or the staff person, because it's part of the condition about the sidewalk. And so if I read LA 11C, what you're saying is that the condition is to fill in that gray space that's on the sidewalk? Is that essentially it, or is it to extend the whole sidewalk? And then my second question is the sidewalk that's there, is it handicap compliant? Because there's a handicap zone at the end, the third one, and I would imagine that somebody would want to wheel their wheelchair along that sidewalk to get into the boardwalk.
You can't.
And I don't know if they can or can't, based on the diagram.
So the diagram shows 4.5 feet, and ADA is 4 feet, so they would be able to access the building. The area that we were talking about for the planter area, you see the area that says front expansion entry? That area is a buffer if you look at the landscape plan. That would be reduced, and then another walkway would be added in that area.
Because when I went by the boardwalk, I thought that there was vegetation right in front of the building, and that's right where it says 2-6. So there's an existing sidewalk there, or is it just an existing planter that's now going to be filled in?
I'm sorry, on 2...
Is a 2'6" planter above the word that says storage, to
that
the
a-
right of the third handicap space? Is that the one you're talking about?
Exactly. I'm just concerned that essentially that sidewalk is, I don't know what it's, I mean, our concern was that somebody from the back of the building, because they don't have enough parking in the front for all the people, that they're going to have to come along that walkway, and essentially we're forcing them out into the parking structure where all the cars are.
Well, actually, that was the point, I thought you made your point earlier, which is the third handicap space does not have access to the building without going out into the parking plaza. And I'm not sure, but I have a strong suspicion that that doesn't meet the handicapped accessibility requirement, because someone who parks there
Should
does
have
not
access
have
to
an
the entire
unimpeded
building.
access to any part of the building. I mean,
Yeah.
it's nearest to the function that's the restaurant, but in fact, they can't get there without
Because
going
if they
through the
need to get
parking.
into any
So
part
I
of
don't
the
think that
building.
counts as a compliant space.
Well, the ADA parking requirements are very specific, and they're not bendable.
Ah.
And so what was designed here has been reviewed by our building official and does meet our ADA parking requirements.
Well, I would modestly suggest that he might want to look at it again, because it looks like a duck, it walks like
Yeah.
a duck, it's not a duck. I mean,
So we can have him do that evaluation and provide a response for us, for the commissioners.
because the other spaces, when you are in that parking space, you have access to some part of the building without going through a parked car. This space does not meet that requirement.
So the plans have been reviewed preliminarily by the building official, but there will have to be a formal, plan check and permitting process still, of
Then
course.
probably
Yeah.
because if it was one building, they could enter one, but they
Yes.
have two
Exactly, this
separate
is two
uses.
separate, right.
Yeah.
Any more questions of staff? Ken?
Nope.
I have, but,
Applicant?
no, wait.
Oh, good. Pass it down to that strong guy at the end.
Good evening, Commissioner. My name is Sanjeev Bhandari. I'm principal with BKBC Architects on the project. I'll answer any questions you have regarding the handicap space. That space is for the office, and it's right next to the elevator we are adding. So it's not for restaurant, already has 2 spaces outside.
How do you get from that
There is
space to the office
It's a
entrance?
clearance in front of the staircase, so
Okay.
you're just missing that path because it's shaded area. So there are no handicap space legally allowed for a wheelchair person to go behind another car.
Oh.
And that's the latest revision to the ADA. So nobody, when they come out of their car, should go behind a second car. And it doesn't, it goes to the elevator.
Which one?
The corner, with the arrow?
The one with the right.
Oh.
So, I just want to clarify what you just said, that the two handicap spots that are on the right side of this diagram, and I'm again looking at LA 11C, are just for the boardwalk and whatever the new addition is.
For the ground floor area, shall we say?
Right. So
We don't know who
And
it
that's
could
the
be.
compliance, I mean, that meets
Yes.
whatever standard. There's supposed to be so many handicap spots. So if somebody parks in the third spot, essentially,
only
once
going
those
to the
first 2 are filled, that's it.
Yeah, then they have to go into the office building, they can't get to the other without going through,
Right.
through the garage, through the parking lot. Not good. Okay, so wait a minute, that's coming this way.
So is that?
This is going, I'll trade you. It's this one with the arrow. And here's the color. They gave us 2.
Where does that limestone go? Can you tell us where that?
Well, it's locally available here.
I'm sorry?
Locally available from,
No, I guess the question.
On sheet LA 11G,
It's number 4 on your 11.
Number 4 on
On number
France.
G, right here?
That's the natural stone pattern.
yeah.
so on LA 11G, it's item 4.
See this?
In the part that says office sign, that little arrow from below points up to that volume. Did you see it?
Okay, and which is stucco?
Right where it says office sign.
Okay,
that little
stucco is item 1, and it's keyed,
See this right here?
I know, but I'm looking for it. It's, I know what it's numbered. Where is it?
portion. It's right here. All of this is.
when you look at the top.
Oh, there it is, there it is.
Top and
Right,
six, yeah.
okay.
Sorry.
What is on the back? What is these big rectangles? What material is that?
Tell us the back elevation, where we have those panels, it says the south elevation, what's the material in that?
It's Tilt-Up. It's an old Tilt-Up building. And we did a 3-4 pages, I think it's 15 series, that even though when you see the facade, when a couple of the commissioner commented last time also, and I hear the concern or comment earlier,
That's not
that
material.
the distance between our building and the next door building is very limited. On going on El Camino, publicly, you don't even see it. There is beautiful, huge, 50-year-old tree in front of it. So the view of this wall, it's wrong to draw an elevation like this. No human being can see this elevation because the distance between this building and the next building is so limited that from El Camino Real, you show me any picture if you can see this. And the person who sits across in the private office building will only see where they sit because, again, it's the vista point. So we don't think there is a view. If it was in a public view, I understand the concern.
So it's stucco? We just
No,
wanted to know
actually,
the
it's
material.
concrete.
Tilt-up
It's just
concrete
tilt-up
structure.
concrete structure, but
Existing.
around it you have stucco because you have the grooves?
Not on this surface. Not on this side. We're not touching this surface because this is right on property line, like staff pointed out. We don't have rights to do anything on that side.
But that's what you have drawn here
No,
appears.
this piece is.
That's further,
No,
but
I'm
what's
looking-
around it?
Here, this whole perimeter.
That's just the cap. Yeah, it's stucco today.
Okay, that's what we want.
It's the stucco that exists today. It will not be the stucco as represented up here.
it will match, we will match the color of the new stucco. So that the headband, so to speak, continues on all around, because that you have a distant view, but the wall you don't have a view.
This is the cultured stone.
Which is where?
That's item 3. It's the, yes.
It's the monument kind of, or not sign, but it's the,
It's the 1950s element. Yeah. It's this, yeah, where the pizza sign is.
Got it.
and on the south elevation, that's on 11A, or 11G, so there's no plan to have a sign on that side?
No, because it's an alley.
You don't see it. That's my, I'm trying to draw a picture. If you look at 15,
Well, I drove down El Camino, and I looked at the building, and I know that the whole wall, you're right, you can't see it, but what I'm talking about is the item 9 that sticks out, which you will see, I think. Or, that's what I'm just asking the question, is there going to be a sign there, or is it just going to be left in that natural stone, and there won't be any way to see?
I
You mean, so pizza's on one side and there's nothing on the other side?
That's kind of my question.
Staff has pointed out, and also conditional approval. We don't know who the tenant is, so there is no point designing a signage. We will come back to you with the master sign program, which will define which sign goes. Maybe it's just one tenant, both floors, and they only want one sign. We don't know. So for a building like this, it's difficult to project. So signage will be a deferred submittal.
As an aside, what's happening with Boardwalk?
We don't know.
Still in limbo?
Does it have any relevance to this conversation?
No.
Just to me.
No.
He's just curious.
Just curious.
So, I think this is your building right here, is that right?
God, I love iPads.
This one?
I love
Yeah,
iPads.
So it feels, I mean, like you see the wall. I think you see it.
You never
don't see
see
the-
the full south elevation.
Exactly,
the
you see
whole
like
But
the
you do
first panel.
see some of the bays.
Yeah, you
And
see-
some people see more than others. If you're walking along the sidewalk, you get
See
one
quite a
view.
bit of it.
Driving by, you get some, and then people in the building adjacent get more and different. Gang, here, have a view. Let's hear for technology.
Is that, yeah, Julia, does that comply with,
Dorm, probably not, yeah. So have
It
everybody
doesn't?
look at it, and then the public doesn't get to look at it, and that's my.
Well, we can, where's the camera?
Oh,
we can actually bring it up on the screen.
On the screen.
That's
Okay.
my only concern. is,
Okay.
the public doesn't-
it's just a Google map. I mean, that was the issue last time when we had been to the site.
you wanna do
And
it?
that's where the comment for this
Google map?
elevation had come,
you're
because we
gonna
all
put
had
on the-
visited the site, and you can see this quite clearly. It's just that it gives us an opportunity to make it better, if we can. So,
Yeah, I think it's winter versus summer. So here is the image class.
Oh, good to be Mike's head.
Sorry, I'm trying to see.
That's okay.
Is it this building here?
Yeah.
yeah.
This is summer.
So now we
Mike,
need
you
to
have
have
a lovely head.
evergreens.
Sorry.
There we go.
So there's it. Can you zoom in? Or the smart?
No, it's probably good enough.
No, this is.
There are like 3 people.
But here's summer.
Summer has more leaves.
I mean, the building next to it, both sides are
Detailed.
detailed, right?
Summer,
Summer.
spring and fall.
Evergreens. I hope you understand, it's just that it's such a nice project, and it's a very nice portion of El Camino, and we have opportunities when we are touching these buildings to make them nicer. So this was at least my concern last time, because we had walked up there. I think some of us had the similar feedback.
Well, we all went to see
Yeah.
the site.
And this
so
wall
That's why
was-
we know that in season, it will be less visible, but in the winter, when there are no leaves, it will
This
be
is
more
it.
visible, and that's going to be ad infinitum, as long as the building's there. And we also know from other experiments on other commissions that trees come and go.
And if there could be some sort of a treatment even on that wall, I think that's what we were looking for. We weren't saying that, you have your orientation of your building on one side, which is perfectly fine. You don't have to have windows or anything on this side. But if there could be some sort of a treatment on this wall, that
And
would...
staff was correct. There's no place unless you impose on your neighbor with a private agreement,
To
which
put
we don't
some-
want to, it's not in our purview we can suggest it, but it's not in our purview, and you can't make someone do it. Vegetation isn't going to work. If you had even 6 inches, you could put a grid on that and grow vines up it, but you have nothing.
Yes.
So what we're looking at is the building itself and saying, okay, here's an opportunity. You could
Materials,
paint the panels,
yeah.
Sure.
whatever.
I think we can do 2 contrasting colors and actually take the tones from the other side and just put tone on tone.
We don't know. I mean, that's up to you as the architect to define, but the idea would be to break this mass, which looks more like a parking garage or a storage space,
Right. It
Which would be nice.
Feels like we're treating that like the back of a building when it's really the side. And one side is having this, beautification and facade rehabilitation, and the other side is ignored. It feels uneven.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the elevation you have for the front facing El Camino, and then this side is talking to the front, but that side is like,
The ugly stepchild.
you really don't care.
Yeah, I think that from architect's point of view, and I understand what you're saying, and I fully agree, that was my concern when I took this project. And that's why we came up with the front expansion and pushed it back so that we can articulate. So in 3D, when you're driving, when you're walking on the street, you will see the front portion. Your eye will not go 50 foot back, and then there are some lines there. Beyond that, not going to be seeing. There's so much in front of you. Why would you, any pedestrian or biker or a person in a car will not see this for even 3 seconds. So for a pedestrian or somebody on a bike, if they are looking at this wall, they're going to bump into somebody. So they shouldn't be. So a pedestrian experience-wise, would they be looking at a 3rd tier, 4th tier features on El Camino, and how many are there? Yes, we can enhance it, we can put a color on it, but there is nothing structurally we can do, nothing, it's, because of
But
the
I
property.
don't think we're asking for
Or
the
paint-
kind of technique that you've put clearly with energy and design on the front and on the other access. What we're saying is, what we read, whether or not it's true, is that this was the tilt up and that was it. What we're saying is, take it the next step up. It's an opportunity to do a little something, even if all it is bringing the color of the other designs around, or moving it 3 shades darker, or in the most visible 2 bays, for example, we often talk about public art. Maybe there's a painted mural, and it's not a sign, so it doesn't have to go through the sign analysis, but it's something that's a gift to the street, because it is...
Could you do what I call pop-out?
You can't do, they're on the property line, they can't do anything except on the plane. But I think that plane has an
Still gives you-
opportunity, and it's not very costly, and it would be fun. Potentially could be.
And it's just
Because the building, I have to say, I think it's a really good building. No, we've all been focusing on this. Let me back up and say, you did a really good job on this. It's a really good design. The only reason we're fussing about this is because the contrast with the rest of it is we're saying, well, it's so good elsewhere. Why can't he do a little more here?
Understood.
We didn't say the good part. The good part is, let me say, it's a very good building.
And
Thank you.
a good
Appreciate
example of a mural done on El Camino is the one that is right behind the Starbucks and the Barbecue Galore on that hotel on El Camino. It's in
Oh, yeah.
Palo Alto.
They've done a beautiful
There
job.
is there was a blank wall,
yeah.
and they did a beautiful mural right there, and that's another.
And
That's a great
something to
option.
think about.
It's something.
So, sorry, we focused on that a bit too much, but that was.
Well, I had a question on that, just so I'm clear. So the material that is on that, not that one, the board underneath, is going to be on the south elevation around the outside of the current structure? Is that how I read this? I'm not a,
It's where you see the lines, I think.
right, I just want to make sure that that's how I'm interpreting this. So this area right here above
Correct.
is going to be that material?
Is the stucco, it's the number one that,
Right.
on the north elevation, is the same headband.
Right.
It's going to wrap all the way around.
That's what it is today.
Right,
And what
exactly.
we're looking at is the interstitial space
No, I got
between
that.
the pilasters.
Yeah.
Any other questions of the applicant?
Can we get the applicant to make a presentation, or is it we done?
That was it?
That was it?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
That was it.
Public comment?
Okay, any public comments? No?
Close the
All right.
public meeting.
Close the public meeting? Okay, discussion. Mike, you want to start, or?
Well, I think we've already asked the applicant what all your topics were, but, I mean, my concern is that the sidewalk that's in front between the two handicap spots, that it should be enough for a wheelchair to get through. I keep looking at it and going, I don't know how many people will park. I know there's two handicap spots. That may be enough, but it seems like it would be consistent to have that third spot be linked, as well as to have access from the back. I guess there is none. I'm just thinking if handicap, if that's it, and somebody has to park somewhere else, how do they get to the front of the building without getting into the
We don't.
Ken?
parking lot?
We've discussed this
Ad nauseam.
ad nauseum. It's fine.
John?
So the materials in person are a lot better than what was in the original rendering. I still would prefer to have seen a color rendering. I think that would have been really helpful, so we can see what it really looks like, but I'm sufficiently comfortable with the materials. I agree that we should make sure that as a practical matter, we address wheelchair accessibility. As somebody who walked around in crutches for 6 weeks, you don't know how difficult life is until you try and use crutches for a couple of months. Really, really awful. I would like to know, and I think the community would like to know, what's going on with the boardwalk. It's not germane per se to our approval or not, but I think letting the community know what's going on with the boardwalk, I think, would be well appreciated.
I can answer that.
Please, if you would, the community, I'm sure, would appreciate it.
So, Mike?
Sure, I respect that, and I had my last conversation with Boardwalk about 2 weeks ago. So they said that we're not committed to stay there. We are exploring other options, and that's the last what they said to me.
We'll see what happens.
That we are not committed,
Okay.
because they have to commit for additional 5 years or something. So I don't know what the personal situation is on their side, but that was the thing, that we're not committed, but we are still, and I am fully flexible. This is what my response was. Let's work it out. I would like them to, stay there for as long as they want to stay there. But the response from the other side was that we can't offer you a commitment at this point. We are exploring other options too.
So are they on a holdover now?
No, not yet. I think the term is till end of June, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, appreciate that.
So I've been through my discussion. I would like to thank staff. We were not clear when they did Condition 11, the investigating vegetation. We weren't clear enough about what we meant, but I think we are clear now, and I think probably when we go to make a motion, we should look at revising 11 to reflect our current discussion. But otherwise, I think the applicant did a great job, and they were responsive, and I agree that the materials in actuality far superior to what the visual presentation was the last time, and I'm very glad that, and we can remark to staff that ain't nothing like the real thing. These paper ones don't quite do it for me.
I'm also comfortable with the materials, and I think we can avoid this situation if we just always have it be a requirement that materials be brought in, and that color, I think color rendering should also be a requirement.
I agree.
That way we take care of that issue. Sounds like, Phoebe, what you're saying is that the condition should be altered so that they articulate something on that south side. That's, I feel strongly about that as well. I feel comfortable that staff can manage what that looks like, that it doesn't need to come back to us for review, but that they are clear that it's not about seeing if they can negotiate space with their neighbor to put minuscule landscaping on a huge wall.
So I think
Actually doing something to the wall.
So I have the same sentiments. I think it's a great improvement. Thank you for bringing the material board in. That really helps. Definitely would like to see colored renderings for our future projects. I think it'll make life easier for everybody up here and for the applicant as well. So I'm not going to repeat everything that everybody up here said. I agree with it. But one thing, it's just an advice. I mean, I'd rather not put a condition to it. I think if accessibility is an issue, I'm pretty sure at building they'll pick it up and make sure that it's done as per code. But I would highly encourage that there is a pathway around. I have 2 little girls, and you have a restaurant in front, and if I'm parking in the back and I have to take the kids around, it just makes it more user-friendly. It's just a better project, I think. So if that's something you can look into, I think it'll just make your project a lot better than it is right now. So that would be just a suggestion on my end. Otherwise, I'm pretty happy with the project.
So would we, I'm trying to figure out how we do a motion. Are we
So
talking
Jerry
about
hasn't
modifying
said anything.
11 and 12? Oh, sorry, Jerry.
Jerry has to have his
Final say.
But then the recommendation in our staff report is to recommend approval to City Council, subject to the findings and conditions as we modify them.
Because I think we need to modify 11 and 12.
Well, and Jerry gets to
And
say
whatever
his-
Jerry wants to say.
Jerry gets the last word.
Get the last word. Okay, here you go.
Got it?
Okay, you guys have, I expanded myself in the last issues.
He's back to his minimalist
Back to
response.
my minimal speaking. I would like to see a motion framed that includes the concern on the handicap parking stall, and that also takes into consideration, it's not condition number 11, is it? It is,
It is. It's prior to building.
it's a general condition prior to building permit submittal, number 11, that talks about the vegetation plan from the adjacent building. So with that, if someone wants to frame a motion, I think it's time to do that. Who would like to do that?
You want me- I don't mind trying.
All right.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve, hold on, I gotta get my minutes.
We recommend approval.
To recommending approval of 13-D-10, the Courtney Fogel, BKBC Architects, 4940 El Camino Real. With the following,
Findings and conditions.
with the findings and conditions, where we modify condition 11, that instead, that we strike the entire sentences, the paragraph there, that condition 11 would be for having, I don't know what color, I don't know how to.
Decorative enhancement of the panels between the pilasters on the south elevation.
Perfectly worded. And that in item 12, we strike that, or we add to it that maybe, that the planting area in front of the boardwalk entrance shall be reduced, and a walkway shall be constructed from the parking lot to the boardwalk entrance, and as well as from the boardwalk entrance to the office.
So before we have a motion.
Well, we have to see if there's a second
Okay,
on that. And
got
then
it.
we
Well, I'm
can
trying to help, if somebody has a better wording, I'm trying to figure out how to word 12.
I'm not sure you're going to get the
Okay.
motion to pass if you put that in. That's why I think you might want to get a second, and then we'll have a discussion.
Okay.
I'll second the first,
Okay.
his first motion.
Do you want to instigate the discussion, or do you want to leave that to general counsel over here.
Mr. Chairman, one thought that I had is 11, rather than make that a condition for later, approval, that the color renderings with that, aesthetic enhancement of the elevation be developed and presented to City Council.
Oh, there's a good thought.
Good point.
I like that.
Yeah.
That'll solve the problem.
So will you accept that as an
I will
amendment
accept that as
proposed
an
by the
amendment to
development
the-
director?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's solved. Thank you.
And can I propose a
Sure.
second one? I don't want to put a condition for the sidewalk.
Well, I mean, that's why I think we need to discuss this, because Malka just said earlier that she didn't want to make it a condition, but she strongly suggested it to the owner.
Because
I
we
have
don't know
the
how it
same feeling.
affects the parking.
Here's my concern, is that the sign that's there, the one that says pizza, is blocking anybody from walking on that area, from one side to the other. They're going to have to go out to the parking lot.
Well, they can't walk in the planter
Well, it's not the
anyways.
walking in the planter. The sign is prohibiting them.
But I think that's another thing, that rather than make that a condition for later consideration, is that be evaluated and presented to City Council why it can or cannot
Rather
be
than
done.
as a condition?
Yeah, the direction from the commission be that we investigate that.
I think I'd rather see it that way, too.
Okay.
So, but I think the question here is, do we have a straw poll on that?
But
Yeah, I don't think we should, isn't a public hearing closed, or?
Yes.
Public hearing is closed.
Closed.
Yes.
He wants to speak again,
But the staff report can have a discussion that this is the desire of the commission, and then there can be analysis of why it can or cannot be done. And then if it can be done, it should be incorporated into the plan set.
Okay.
I would
say
rather-
Draft that.
Well, so just to make sure that we're all on board here on commission, so there is a part of the signage that would, even if it wasn't planted, that would preclude someone walking, wheelchairing along a substandard width, but nonetheless a piece of sidewalk.
right,
That's what that darkened projection is,
exactly.
above the storage zone defined by 2'6". And so if we want, we can modify, we'll ask the motion maker if he will accept an amendment that will say two things. First, that this should be addressed before the city council meeting with the applicant prepared to discuss with city council what decision was made and why on the behalf of the design. But also, if it is the recommendation, and we'll need to do a straw poll, should the recommendation say we would suggest that they do that, but is it something we want to mandate, which is what the motion says now, or do we want to lower it? And that really is what the straw poll needs to be among us commissioners. I
My
know that
only
Mark
cons-
and I are on the same page. I don't know about anybody else.
Because my concern is whenever we say that this is what we want, we really don't know what the chain reaction is on the site
I
plan.
hear you.
Yeah.
So that's my only concern. Sorry, Renan, go ahead.
So how would you word that?
Well, first, I think we need to find out, there is a motion on the table that has been approved that says this should be done.
right.
And so now we need to find out,
Would you accept
as a
it?
straw poll, if the motion's not going to pass, then we can offer an amendment.
Okay. I'm leaning towards the less restrictive.
As am I.
Okay, so
Procedure.
by there, that's obviously the majority.
So I
now we
offer
wanna-
amendment to the motion that has been approved, if you will accept it.
Sure.
That instead of mandating that there be a pathway from the handicapped accessibility area to the office building as well as to the front usage, that the applicant investigate that as a possibility, and if they are not going to do that, be prepared to discuss both why it was recommended and why they chose not to do it for city council, as opposed to
To justify
before.
their actions in that sense?
Well, because if it's at the time of building permit, that's different. I'm saying before they go to council, they
Right.
need to discuss
Yeah,
it.
that was my,
And so that's my amendment. Will you accept that?
Sure, but I'm not sure, is that part of recommendation 12? We leave recommendation 12 as it is?
No, I think you
And
changed
then,
12.
and then we change 12 to say that we'd like to have, before the applicant goes in front of city council, that the walkway be explored and be prepared to present to the council the pros and cons of whatever is decided.
right, in the staff report, will include that same analysis, so we can agree with it or disagree with it.
James, are you clear on what's going on here?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask
Okay,
a
good.
question about how this gets presented, particularly the backside issue? If we, when you present it to council, assuming there's more articulation or enhancement of the backside, is it presented as this is the approved project by planning, or do you say that between the planning and this council meeting, applicant was asked to provide more color, enhancement, articulation, or mural, and this is the...
Right, the latter, and that'll be a discussion in the staff report. It'll reflect the discussion that took place tonight.
So we do have a motion.
So I amended my item 12.
I will
You seconded?
second that.
You made that the original second?
Original was
Who
Ken.
made the original second?
Ken was
Ken?
it?
I second.
So you...
You accept the amendment also?
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Fall.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Moving
Are
right.
you guys clear on what needs to be done?
Staff will
Staff will
help.
figure it out.
I guess the question, do you understand what we're concerned about?
Because that 2-foot planter we are showing is the overhang of the car, it's a full car space, so we'll wipe out 4 cars. If you put a sidewalk, then the car is illegal.
Well,
And
which is
any
why,
place is illegal.
you need to present that to city council.
We'll draw it up both ways.
Cool.
If you're okay to lose 4 cars, we'll do it.
After our discussion with parking, oh my God.
Well, he has excessive
Well,
parking.
you had excessive parking dramatically.
Okay, that's okay, we are done with the,
Oh, we're done.
Legal size,
it's closed.
up to the wall. And by building code, we are allowed to overhang the front of the car. So that planter is a creative way to do small planting in the car space dimension. So there is no dimension. And we don't have dimension behind the car either to move the parking space 3 foot back. And so there is no way physically other than just wiping out those 4 flags.
But that's the direction of the motion, is to do that analysis and present
So
that
we're
to
just
City Council.
suggesting, sure, just clarify.
Thank you.
Make it clear in case city council has a question, that it's already been considered.
It's already been analyzed and discussed and presented, yes.
Cool.
Okay, item 5, joint meeting with city council. Discussion of potential upcoming joint meeting with the city council. Any ideas here?
None.
I think we should do it.
It was already,
I think we should definitely have a joint meeting with
it's already
city
talked
council.
about.
In 2014?
Talked about it at 7 o'clock.
As soon as possible. And I would suggest that
Yes.
one of the items we could discuss is our recommendations relative to parking
Well, they weren't
management
here,
in
so-
our town and the need for parking.
All right, what great insight.
Any other items we might want to, and the other item that we have been asking for several meetings is telephonic permission to reinstate telephonic attendance of meetings for this particular commission, which was agendized, not for a date certain, but I saw it on the city council long-term agenda. So maybe that's something we could discuss at that time and present our position as a group.
And we've been talking about traffic analysis at a number of the key
No, it hasn't.
intersections that are flashpoints in this town, specifically intersection First and San Antonio, and then Main Street and
No, first doesn't-
First and Main.
Yeah.
First and Main.
That's a big one.
Because
Well, so if staff were going to write an agenda item, how would you like to see them, how would you define that agenda item?
Here are the 3 topics that we'd like to discuss.
Well, those are the topics, and get direction from council as to whether they want us to proceed on those things, and then if so, if they have some input in terms of direction and timing, because obviously each of those requires staff resources, right? And I know the city manager is very fussy about how staff resources get used, and I mean, this is outside the normal respond to applicants, so.
So would the city manager typically attend with us this joint meeting with city council? Yes? Oh, good.
She would? Yeah.
We don't have one yet.
Doug did. I think,
Maybe knowing
March 18th?
Is it March 18th? Because on the staff report, it says that it may or may not happen. We have to request it, so we're requesting it. And that
March 5th or March 18th?
March 4th or March 18th.
March 5th or March 18th?
So what's in the staff report's incorrect?
There's two dates they're looking at. And we can express a preference for either date.
I'm not going to be here on the 5th.
Well, wait a minute.
But it's
The 5th is a Wednesday. Is that
Right.
what you
He's saying-
wanted?
He's saying the 4th, not the 5th.
You wanted the 4th, which is a Tuesday.
Oh, excuse me, it's the 4th.
4th or the
Thanks, James.
18th?
Excuse me.
Okay.
And right now,
And
I'm
so-
downtown, I'm around both dates, amazingly.
Who is not available for any or either of these meetings?
I'm not available on the 4th. I am available on the 18th.
So all of us are available on the 18th, and Jerry can't be for the one, so that would be first choice and second choice.
Curious and asking because I'm just finding out a few dates. So I just wanted to.
Yeah?
if I'm available.
So can we calendar that now, David?
Yes, we just need to let the city clerk know.
Okay.
So we'll-
Now, what time would it be, like 6?
That's not certain yet.
Well,
I would
when
expect
city
the
council
evening.
meets at 7, so we have
7,
to
so
be
we would
before
probably do it
that,
at 6.
at least.
Well, it's not a
Not a
meeting,
normal.
it's not a normal meeting. It's a special meeting.
So I'd expect it sometime between 5 and 7.
The normal city council meeting is the 25th.
Ah, so we're between city council meetings
Exactly.
there. Got it.
So here's a question, if we don't ask for a specific amount of time, we will get whatever they decide they think we need. And my question is, based on those 3 agenda items, is there an amount of time that we think would be appropriate to engage in a robust discussion and get some clarity on priorities and direction?
At least 2 hours?
Okay.
Well, it's going to be less than 2 hours, I would guess, but I'm just,
I don't know, it's a lot of interesting conversation.
Well,
If we're going to have a conversation versus, are they just going to say, this is the direction, and we don't have a,
I mean, in essence, tell us what
yeah, is it a one-way conversation, or is it
It
a
might
two-way
be.
conversation? I
it might
don't,
be.
well, I'd certainly like it to be a
Find out what-
dialogue as opposed
It's a
to
tough group to say that to.
what we've had in the past, which have been more,
I think
More
just
formal?
Establishing that we're going to meet them, this is what we want on the agenda, and then
Well,
they
okay.
can tell us how much time years.
Okay, so
Okay,
those are the 3 items.
so we
that-
have 3 items. We would prefer it to be on the 18th so that all of us can be here, and we would hope to get a couple of hours if we can and see what they're able to do.
Okay.
If we can change the subject briefly, but it's council, it's
Do you want to go to commissioners' reports or something in between
something
that?
slightly different in between. And I noticed that both Malka and I are not going to be available for the mandatory
Training.
training session.
which is the 29th of April.
Right. Which,
which is the 29th of March?
April.
29th of April.
April.
which-
Well, last time, I missed the last one, and they gave me a CD that I watched, so there is a way you can make it up.
That's fine. That's all I needed to know.
That's
There
generally what we
was-
did, right? That's what they did last time. Is it still available if you missed the,
It's now on Netflix, too. Yeah, so,
There's other ways.
there's other ways to do it, so. Okay, commissioners' reports and comments? Anybody, did anyone go to who was designated to?
I went to a city council meeting.
So did I, okay.
Okay, I went to the meeting on the 11th. Would you like that report?
And I was there too, okay, yeah, go ahead.
So the only agenda item that really had impact to us was the Oak Street approval of the portables for the preschool, and that was continued because apparently there was some question about the noticing to the public. And I don't know whether it never got into the town crier or what happened, but that was delayed. Russ Morales did give a report on the state of the city, and the good news is Russ has done a phenomenal job of managing and keeping track of money, and the city is in pretty good fiscal health. The bad news is he's leaving.
Oh, no.
And so he's going back to Southern California where his family is. So we are unfortunately, as a community, losing him. And it will be a tremendous loss, something which everybody on council acknowledged in that meeting. So that was Russ Morales.
The finance director.
He was finance director. And he's done a fabulous job of making financial reports that people
actually
in the city
understand,
and
yeah.
the public can actually understand. So
Well, they set the bar. They know what good is now. Hopefully, they will interview and find someone who can
Yeah.
meet that level. I also was a city council person. It was the meeting 2 weeks after that. Didn't bring my notes. I don't believe there was anything that affected us at that meeting.
And you went anyway?
I watched it. I watched it from the house. But I remember thinking to myself,
commercial's good?
unfortunately, fortunately, it's commercial-free, but I have to say, there was a lot of discussion, but nothing really affected us. So,
Okay, any,
I have an announcement.
given the excitement, any potential future items that,
Well, no, I don't know if everybody got a notification that the 2040 Expressway Plan is going to be discussed this Friday
I saw
between 3 to 6, just making it available to the public.
do you know what the format of that meeting is? Is it going to be the same?
The agenda has been published, and the agenda is essentially they're presenting, and I'm not sure I'm not sure how it relates to the other one.
Okay, because the last one was not particularly
it was
this looks-
underwhelming.
underwhelming, yes.
This looks like it's like a formal meeting. They're going to say this item, and you have public comment, and anybody can give public
Oh,
comment
good.
on that item. Part of it's their plan, part of it's, what the future direction is. I was hoping that a lot of people would show up and talk about the Fremont Street Bridge.
It's
White Loyola.
funny you should mention that.
Because-
we were supposed to, the people who were at the first meeting when we were significantly underwhelmed, one of the representatives was supposed to get back to someone on city staff to tell us where they are in the design, because it says in design, but we have seen nothing. And so,
Well, and I've read all
probably
the...
be built before we
Well,
see it.
as we talked about, and the commission, when they talked about it, which is they're looking at to build a four-lane bridge with 2 lanes of sidewalk, and a lot of us were saying, well, wait a minute, what are you doing on the other side of that bridge, because it's all unincorporated county, and you've got a major problem in trying to make this huge tank or large bridge across the structure, and both sides of it don't seem to support it.
And I remember at the time, we also pointed out, and I think it might have been you, Mike, that there's a major bicycle pathway there that was being disrupted by their original design. I thought at the time that their representative had taken that input, but we have seen
We've not-
nothing to
nothing.
show that it's been incorporated.
Yeah, and the ADA access of somebody on a wheelchair getting through there, there was like a lot of issues that we presented, and I haven't heard anything back from the county, which I'm planning to go to, again, as a member of the public, say, this doesn't seem like a good idea.
Is
Yeah,
it
very good.
Cecil who would know?
I forget the individual's name, but City Council did just receive an update with graphics this evening, and I'll forward that to the commissioners. I can do that tonight, and then we'll copy Cedric, and he can answer if any other questions that come up.
So where is this physically taking place? This-
It's at the Hillview Center in room 2.
Okay.
James, do we have any, does the city of Los Altos have any negotiating leverage with the county with regards to signaling and the way the signals are set on the expressway? Or is it just sort of like tough luck?
It's somewhere in the middle. I think they're cooperative and working with the city, but they have their priorities and their expressway priorities, but they're certainly open to meeting and hearing from the city.
I also would like to give staff kudos for the project at Homestead Road. It's been finished now, and the
Yeah.
way the traffic lights
Yeah.
and everything, it's just flowing so much easier.
Yeah.
And it's just been a great thing. The one thing I did notice, and I don't think staff is aware of this, is that the stop signs that were on the bike paths have been covered with black garbage bag. like somebody doesn't want them, and I don't think staff would have done it. And in fact, they've been removed at one intersection. One of them has been pulled out of the sign work, and the bike route sign has been removed as well. So not that I would encourage what was there, because I think it was an overkill, personally, when you look at that, but you might want to look at,
Okay.
it's like we've got stuff, and there's like a upcoming stop sign that says there's going to be a stop sign, but there's no stop sign.
Yeah. So I have a question for staff, and this pertains to a future agenda item, which is we've been talking about doing the good, the bad, and the ugly. I have two questions, which is, one, do we have a date? And secondly, are you looking...
The good, the bad, and the ugly tour.
Right, the ugly tour, good, bad, ugly tour. And secondly, are you looking to get input from us on specific projects? I heard from a neighbor just the other day about, they were very impressed with, as an example, what's been happening at Pilgrim Haven, which certainly was a lightning rod project for that neighborhood, and certainly, even though it's still in progress, it'd certainly be an interesting project to look back at and understand sort of what worked and what didn't. But do we have a schedule yet?
I'm looking at the March 20th.
When?
Looking at March 20th.
Okay.
You know, this brings up, if you have even an inkling of a date coming up and can send it through to the email, to the site of the commission, this is very, very tentative.
Or save
but
the date.
Save the date, because for some of us, we're planning months in advance for trips
Yeah.
and so on, and these are meetings that we don't want to miss.
Exactly.
And since we can't do them telephonically until we talk to council, the more notice we get, even if it's just to save the date and it changes, the better it is for me. I can speak personally, and I think I'm
Agreed,
not
but
the only
I've
one.
already told people that I may be traveling the 20th, so, I mean, a month's notice
Of March, I think we were talking
is...
about, March 20?
Yeah, is just not enough time to plan these things, so I would encourage staff to give us
As soon as you think.
6 to 8 weeks'
Yeah.
notice.
Well, as
because-
soon as you get an inkling, give us
Yeah,
a heads up,
please.
because
And
we can work around it.
And we don't mind if you change it, but just kind of like, this is what I'm
Well,
thinking.
we do mind if you change it, but we prefer to have something
I don't know
that we
why
can
it's
put
a
on our
regular
calendars
business
and
meeting,
move
so
other things
maybe-
around.
Exactly.
We should-
And right now, I've told people I'm available to travel, that starting the end of that week, so I may or may not, but if I'd known it was going to happen, then I would have...
But isn't that's a regular PTC meeting date?
Yeah, but
Were you
I-
thinking it would be before that, or in lieu of, as a special meeting?
Yes.
In lieu of.
Earlier,
lieu
so
of.
there's daylight. And one of the things I was thinking was, we could also send out a homework list of projects, and that you could visit at
I
your
would
leisure.
like that.
In advance?
And then we can convene during our normal meeting, have pictures, and have a discussion. Good point.
That would work.
That might be a better
Yeah.
use of time and whatever, but if
Is there
I
any
want to make sure
issue?
everybody's available, though, for the date.
Is there any issue if few of us went together to see those projects?
As long as it's not a quorum.
Because I think it's useful to have various, I've always
Just
appreciated
curious.
when architects point out things to me that, as somebody who's not an architect, I would never have thought about. And, and so I find that discussion while you're looking at something is sort of ideal. It may not be practical in this case, but it's...
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I agree, that would be more effective. The van concept sounds
Absolutely.
good, but it doesn't work that well. You're not getting that much done in the van.
No.
I think, will work
I think,
better.
David, you're right on it. And as long as we have the architectural, what was presented to the commission, because it would be nice, just like today, where we saw the boardwalk or that building, and we kind of know what it looks like, but we really don't. So to go see it and see what was presented, and then can see where we need to be clear, that would be helpful.
Right, but I think what will help is if there are specific details that we should be looking at. I think each location should have the address and the specific things that you want us to look at and take note of, because I think that will help us take it in as opposed to just sort of,
Well, not
doing the
only-
tour.
Not only what to look at, but why it's being suggested to
Yes.
have it looked at.
Why it made the list?
Right.
Right, why it's an example.
Yeah.
Well, if you have to guess, we have a problem.
Any other potential future items that you guys can think of, gals can think of?
Mike, I just
Meeting's adjourned.
wanted to ask, it's 5 o'clock at Hillview 2 on Friday? 3 o'clock?
Rick, it's like 3